Hello, hello. Welcome, puppies and kittens, to another episode of SkepTalk. The Line, that whole amalgamation of programs. Who have I got? Aron Adair? How you do?
I do well. Sounds like you have started off the night with a good beverage.
Yeah, the Temptress Nitro. Okay. All right. So, are you doing the call line tonight, or am I?
I got it open. Yep, I'm ready to go with it.
Okay, I'll let you run that tonight. Very good.
Super. All right, and hopefully I'll be on point. The beverage I have here has a high pH of 7, so who knows what that's going to do to my brain.
A pH?
It's water. Okay, it's just I'm maximizing what chemistry knowledge I barely have.
Yeah, well, just be warned. That hydrogen monoxide is fatal if swallowed.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, not swallowed. If inhaled. Fatal if inhaled. Which makes it sound much worse.
Indeed.
All right. So what have you done last time I've seen you?
Well, let's see here. Most importantly, we both participated in the big fundraiser for our Secular Student Alliance. And happened to be part of that, and that we got our goals in. So, woo!
Yeah, I don't know why. I'm just no good at those things. Just begging for money in general, I'm no good at. That's why I had to get out of politics.
But if you were begging sufficiently, you too could be on Air Force One force-feeding McDonald's, as a certain health advocate apparently is doing.
Yeah. Let's just try not to even think about that, shall we?
We can try. I'm going to try so hard, but these 4 years are going to go real slow.
I am so burned out on trying to point out the screamingly obvious to people who are utterly oblivious.
Well, we're going to try to do our best here, one call at a time.
Yeah.
So,
do we have
how about
calls?
we get started? Yes, we do. So, our first caller that we have here is Steve. He, him, comes to us as a theist asking about the wow signal. I believe I know what he's referring to, but let's see what his take on is and what makes us go, wow. Steve, can you hear us?
Yeah. Hi, Aron and Aron. Yeah, thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I just thought you guys would be interested in knowing of this message in genetic coding, which expresses the equation of an Egyptian triangle when factoring out 37 from the structural, componential, atomic masses belonging to bioessential amino acids that are sufficiently defined by their codons' first and second base nucleotides. And this artificially generated signal embedded in genetic coding suggests life on Earth was formed by extraterrestrial intelligence. So what do you guys think about us being the spawn of extraterrestrial intelligence?
You would have a hard time convincing me that we were the spawn of terrestrial intelligence at this point.
Okay.
So, yeah, Steve, you're going to have to help us here a bit.
Paper I'm referring
you're going to probably have to break this down, because you just gave us a really long run-on sentence that is word salad to, I think, 99% of humans. So, start off, wow signal. What's supposed to be important about that? What do you understand about it that's supposed to be important?
Well, I understand that these couple of scientists, astrophysicists, Vladimir Servat and Popakov, about 11 years ago, they claimed to have unlocked a message embedded in our genetic code. And this apparent artificially generated information signal embedded in our genetic code describes an Egyptian triangle, and how the scientists found this.
So wait, stop. Hold on. I feel like we're already off track, because first off, I was asking about the wow signal, and you're talking about the genetic code.
Okay, the wow signal is from SETI, the big ear that picked up supposedly like a 73-second signal back in '77, and that was a radio signal. And they make a reference to that in the abstract of this paper. It was published in Icarus about 11 years ago. so they make reference to that, and but what this is an actual signal that they unlock that's in the genetic code. Are you familiar with that?
Or is this this genetic code, this message, when you decode it, does it say something along the lines of drink your Ovaltine?
No, when you decode it, it comes up with a formulation for the equation of Egyptian triangle, and
So
it
you've
has
mentioned this phrase a few
patterns.
times. What's an Egyptian triangle? Because I've seen triangles. I've seen Egypt.
Okay.
I don't know what an Egyptian triangle is.
Okay, so how they found the signal is based on the fact that of the canonical amino acids, the 20 bioessential amino acids that all life needs. Well, 8 of these can be defined by the composition of their codon's first and second base nucleotides. And then the amino acid proline's core component uniquely has 73 nucleons, in contrast to the other canonical amino acids, aforementioned amino acids, and they each have 74 nucleons. And then when you transfer a hydrogen atom from the proline side chain to its core component, you standardize the atomic masses at 74. And consequently, the atomic masses of these side chains of this grouping is 333, which is 37 times 3 squared. And their main core structure atomic mass is 592, which is 37 times 4 squared. And the sum of their total is 935 or 925, which is
so Steve, I asked a relatively simple question, and I feel like we've got like 30 different things here. So let's stop for a moment. Let's stop for a moment.
I have a question, a simpler question first. Which version of the Doctor are you trying to contact?
Dr. Adair, and is it Sir Nelson? I'm sorry, I can't see who else is there. Is that you, Mr. Nelson?
My name is not Nelson.
Or Ra, I'm sorry, Aron Ra, sorry.
Aron Ra. That's Aaron sitting next to me.
Aron.
I'm Aron.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Aron. Sorry, I got your name and the other Aaron's name mixed up. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, I suggest not quite so many gummies on one evening.
Okay. I'm going to try to go with this one thing at a time, Steve, but that means one thing at a time. So if you give me 30 different alleged facts, I'm going to pull you back. And if this keeps going on, we're going to pause. And if you keep going like that, we're going to drop. All right, Steve?
Okay.
Let's start. I asked a simple question. What is an Egyptian triangle? Just what is it?
Well, that would be a triangle that has a right angle, and one side is 3 squared, the other side is 4 squared, and then the other side is equal to 5 squared. The geometrical symbol, mathematical symbol.
So, okay, so it's a right triangle, and specifically it has side lengths 3, 4, 5, or those ratios. Okay.
Right.
So what you're saying is, through some math, somebody found that ratio somewhere along the way inside genetic code.
Right. They were looking for this mathematical pattern, and they found it.
And how do you come up with that, going through however many billions of codons? You know, what is it?
Well, it's in a paper titled "The Wow Signal of the Terrestrial Genetic Code."
It's in a paper called what?
The Wow Signal of the Terrestrial Genetic Code, and the researchers' names are Vladimir Sherbak and Maxim Kop. That last name I can't pronounce. Is Kukov.
Yeah, Makyukov.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think I do vaguely remember this. It's one of the intelligent design arguments where they try to shift the burden of proof onto anybody else, while they assume as default they're supernatural. So that whatever they can't understand is therefore magic, and anything that you don't understand, the explanation is magic. So science can't explain X, therefore magic. And by magic they mean God, but it's supernatural miracles, the same thing as magic. So their
No, I
argument
don't think
was
I don't think
that the
direct
genetic code
panspermia is a
contains
magic. I don't
features
think
that are
they're saying
difficult.
magic
Excuse me.
about
Hello,
extraterrestrial.
hello. I'm speaking.
Yes.
That they're saying that the genetic code contains features that are difficult to explain through natural processes, which means that we are to assume supernatural processes, i.e., magic.
No, they don't assume. The authors don't assume that at all. They assume
Okay,
that
but
this
the way
was.
that the people
They
source this
assume
do,
common
the only
cosmic
reason I've heard of
ancestry.
it is because that is the argument people make. If science finds it difficult to explain something, therefore God.
Okay, if I were to tell you that we have evidence of extraterrestrial visitation, would you be open to the idea of direct panspermia?
Why? Because those are unrelated.
Right, but would you be open to the consideration that they may be linked? Possibly.
There's no need for panspermia, directed or undirected. We have everything needing to be going on in abiogenesis already has been confirmed to exist on this planet. So there's no need to evoke outer space influences.
Right, and they're not mutually exclusive. Directed panspermia and abiogenesis is not mutually exclusive because abiogenesis has to happen somewhere, and direct panspermia is just another.
Okay, so not only are they
process.
not mutually exclusive, they're not dependent on each other. There's no reason to. Okay, so if we had extraterrestrial visitation in the last, say, century, does that in any way imply that life was seeded on this planet 4 billion years ago? No. And we have every indication that life happened here naturally anyway. We have all of these little elements, all of these little increments, all these different types of chemical processes that all accumulate into the development of life, such that there's no need to imagine panspermia.
No, but the life extraterrestrial visitations aren't unique to the last century. They go back even to mythological astronomical satellites, extraterrestrial satellites.
Are you bringing that up just to tease me in particular? Because that seems directed at me, Steve.
That's a theory.
I say that because I wrote an entire book about the Star of Bethlehem.
Hello?
Right, and other phenomenon like the 24-hour day over Jericho could be explained by extraterrestrial mirrored satellites and
actually,
solar shows.
There's actually an even better explanation. It's called fiction. And in the case of the Star of Bethlehem, we know it's fiction. With the story of Joshua and the sun standing still, we know that's fiction because there was no conquest, because there was no exodus, because the whole story was invention of mythology centuries after the fact.
That's another explanation too. Yes.
Well, that is the explanation. There is no other explanation.
That's your guys' opinion.
Okay, well, there isn't one. So you've got either magic invisible man or flying saucers and little green men, neither of which are indicated, neither of which have any probability attached to them, and both of them defy logic. It's easier to explain without them. It's harder to explain how those things could be true, how there could be a God, how there could be little green men visiting this planet in secret for 4 billion years, and why their technology hasn't succeeded where ours did.
Well, there's nothing secret about extraterrestrial visitation. There was 20 years ago, the U.S. Navy observed a tic-tac shaped material object going.
Yeah, I understand that there are unidentified flying objects. I understand that there are, unexplained aerial phenomena. But you understand what unidentified and unexplained means?
This was tracked on radar,
Right,
and
I understand.
there was close
Unexplained,
contact by naval fighters.
unexplained does not mean explained by extraterrestrial visitors.
What else could go from 60,000 feet altitude?
Lots of aerial
60,000
phenomena
feet
might
down
be
to
able to have
hovering
that
50
capacity.
within 3
Aerial
seconds.
illusions
Steve,
of various
it's worth noting-
types. There's lots of different
No,
things
it
that
was on
might be,
radar.
but we're not
This
going
was
to
picked up on
assume
radar.
things without evidence to
Read the
conclude
report.
those things.
Advanced Aerial Space Threat Identification Program, Tic Tac UFO Executive
Okay.
Summary.
Steve,
You can
Steve,
read this
if you're going to
report
tell me about that report,
online.
you better take a look at what the leader for that group said. And when he retired from running, I believe they called it ATIP, the group, the organization that basically was looking into all these UAP reports, basically said no evidence here of actual alien stuff. And in particular, the measurements that you were saying of this aircraft zipping up and down, nobody actually recorded that. This is based on someone's memory of radar equipment that also can, make
They
bad
conveniently
feedback
destroyed the
signals.
recordings, the radar recordings. And how convenient.
And then there was
for
another
destroying
such
one
sighting
shot.
No,
where
the actual
How
fact is they just don't
convenient.
record that in general. Now, Steve, here's
And there
the
was
thing.
another such sighting where they
to-
recorded this incredible amount of speed that this thing accelerated to. And then they realized that in their analysis, they were actually recording the waves in the water on the other side of the object rather than the speed of the object itself. So from that perspective, from that moving perspective, it looked like it was going 2 or 3 times the speed of sound, but it was in fact not going that fast.
There is a video footage of this. You can look it up online. Just put
Steve,
in.
I actually already gave you what the
UFO.
conclusions of the people who actually scientifically, as much as possible, analyze this. And then they said there's no evidence of alien spacecraft here.
Yeah.
Do you think a human could take a -4 G-force?
Maybe, Steve,
Could our
what you're saying
drones?
isn't right. Steve,
Could our
let me
drones
just
do
tell
years
you
that?
this.
ago, come on, 20 years ago, we don't even have drones today that can go 60,000 feet
Steve,
in the course
you
of
have a
2
false
seconds.
premise. And the premise
We don't
is
even have
you
that now.
know what G forces this thing did. Did we have an accelerometer on this device?
Well, you could just do the math and figure if you go from 60,000 feet down to a sudden stop over.
Or-
If in
50
fact
feet
any
or-
of that data is correct,
over water,
if any of that data is correct, which we don't know it is.
because the records were conveniently destroyed. Now we have to swap
Oh,
people's memories.
isn't that remarkable how whenever you're supposed to come up with evidence for your position, that it always turns out conveniently that there was a massive conspiracy to
disappeared
conceal the
conveniently,
truth
yeah.
that
Why
only
did
you
that
know
surprise you?
and that even the experts couldn't find?
Well, there is a report. Anybody interested? Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
And
That UFO
I also
executive
told you the
summary.
government program that looked into all of those and came back and said, hey, we had all the classified data related to all these things. We looked into it and we couldn't find anything that indicated out of this world technology.
Yeah, so we get back to the words unexplained, which does not mean explained. It means not explained. So your explanation, not an explanation. There is no explanation, and yours is among the no explanation category.
Mine's the best plausible, most plausible explanation.
How would you know?
Because what other explanation do you have?
There is no. What you're describing is not an explanation.
Radar,
If it's not indicated, then it's not an explanation.
Hovering 50 feet over water. What other
Okay.
explanation do you come up with, sir?
Steve, I think you need
You're
to
not
realize
able to
something
listen
about
when I
sensor
speak.
readings.
So
Yeah, Steve, here's the thing about sensor readings. Sometimes they can be misinterpreted, sometimes to dangerous ends. So back during the Cold War, I believe it was the US almost launched nuclear weapons, thinking there was a Soviet fleet of aircraft coming, and they didn't realize that their radar was actually returning the moon. We confused the moon for Soviet bombers.
yeah. There was
These
another
sorts of
instance where
things
for it.
happen.
Get the video footage online. Just Google Tic Tac UFO. There is video footage of this.
yes,
And
I
ask the
understand. You
pilots
got
that engaged this
insufficient
craft.
data to make an assumption and assumed the impossible anyway. I get it. You're
Talk to the pilot
determined
that
to come
engaged
up with
the
little
craft.
green men as your answer, and you're going to come up with little green men.
I think his name is Dave Graber, or I can't remember the pilot's name that engaged the craft. He described it as
Yes.
otherworldly craft. Those are his
Now,
Okay.
here's
words,
the thing.
not mine.
Here's the thing, though. What he saw isn't the same thing as what you saw on the video. And what was on the video and what he saw wasn't the same thing from the radar readings. We didn't actually have multiple sensor things seeing the same thing at the same time. These were all actually separate events. And they have been collapsed together in the imagination of ufologists. I've actually looked
Why do
into
you
this
know
and
so
actually
much
studied
about
this.
How do
actually
you know
looked.
so much about this?
I've actually
Because
read the
we're
original.
curious. Because when I was a child, I wanted this to be a possibility to consider. So I explored it as much as I could, and then rationally came to the conclusion that it didn't make any sense.
Well, I think it's just a matter of time. We'll see. We'll see.
I'm
Here's the thing.
afraid it's
People
not,
People
because
are saying
I
it's
was a
been a matter of
child when I
time
figured this
for
out, and
years.
you still haven't. So I don't know how much more time you need.
We'll have some more congressional hearings. We brought them up
Steve,
this last
Steve,
week.
are you familiar
We'll bring them
of
up
how
again.
long Congress has been investigating this?
Well, I know it's been a few years. They've had a couple of these.
It's been
hearings. We're going
decades.
to have more.
Yeah, you've heard
This
of
goes
Project
back-
Blue Book? That was in the 1950s or 60s. So
Yeah, and then you
they've
had
been
the
looking
Condon
into this for a
report,
hell of a
basically
long time.
Yeah, and you had the Condon report, which was basically summarizing a lot of that work. Again, that was towards the end of the 1960s. There has been all sorts of government investigation into this all the way back into the 1940s. So this is not just brand spanking new stuff that Congress is only starting to get interested in now. It's basically a media narrative that's pushed that's just popped to the top of our consciousness again because some people found out, hey, it's a good way to make a good grift. In reality, it's a whole bunch of grainy videos of disparate things shoddily put together.
They have high resolution photos. The government
actually
sitting
we
on
don't
high
have.
resolution photos.
Sitting
Of-
on.
of
Guess
these
what? Guess who didn't see that?
extraterrestrial
Guess who
craft.
didn't see those high resolution
They're
photos?
not letting the public see them.
But guess who also could not see them? Apparently, the people with access. So again, I mentioned ATIP was the organization within this trying to look at all of these UAP reports, and they had the ability to look at all the classified data. So anything about it being top secret, they couldn't see that. No, they were given that access, and they looked at that, and guess what they didn't see? Nobody said they came back and saw high-resolution photos of flying objects or of alien bodies. So what you're saying is there, you can't actually demonstrate it, and worse, those who can look at it have come back and said, there ain't nothing here.
Yeah, and the more probable explanation to my 11-year-old mind was when I was reading Erich von Däniken and Zachariah Sitchin, and they were talking about how these things were not extraterrestrials; they were time travelings from the future.
Well, we'll talk to Louis Elizondo. He was
Who actually lies about his credentials. Now look into him, and you will discover that actually the stuff he says about himself isn't true.
Talk to Louis Elizondo and get his opinion.
You're not listening, are you? What did Aaron just tell you?
No, I'm sorry. I'm having some audio difficulties. Hello?
Yeah, we hear you. You don't hear us, but we hear you.
Okay, I can hear you now. Okay, go ahead.
So
Aaron, you want to repeat that?
Louis, so Louis makes all sorts of claims about what he did for the CIA or under Pentagon aegis. And here's the thing. The Pentagon basically came back and said, this guy never worked for us. So his credentials are not only not confirmed.
How convenient. Just deny the guy.
Or maybe he's a fucking liar who's trying to make money. That's the other possibility. And guess what?
Well,
it's pretty darn easy to lie for money. People do that all the time. They call it creationism.
Well, I haven't seen this guy out selling any books.
He's
They're
literally
asking for
selling a book.
money.
It's literally on Amazon right now. And he was telling Congress just this last week, go read my book. So that's how much attention you have been paying to this. He is literally trying to sell his book in front of Congress.
Yeah. You know, there's a word for people who too readily believe improbable claims from questionable sources on insufficient evidence. You know what that word is? I think we may have lost him.
Yeah, he may have dropped. Yep, he's
Okay.
gone.
All right.
Self-dropping. Always good. Yeah. Once you get shown that you're just, talking out your behind, you might want to leave. It's a stopping is a good idea.
My thought is when however old this guy is, and I'm guessing he's right around my age, probably closer to my age than your age, I would say. And yet he is where I was when I was 11 or 12.
Boy, though, if we wanted to keep going down this rabbit hole, I shouldn't say rabbit hole. What is it? Werebeaver hole. I think it was a werebeaver. So part of the investigation of these alien spacecraft that were happening in the 2000s, 2010s, was funding to look at paranormal activities going on in Utah at what place that gets called Skinwalker Ranch. And I believe one of the things they said they were investigating was a werebeaver, but I need to double check if I'm getting my hybrid animals mixed up. But it was literally looking for like ghosts and werewolves and those sorts of things at Skinwalker Ranch. And among the things they were also researching was alien spacecraft seen around there. So that's the quality of the evidence that's being brought before Congress. Some pilots who have said they've seen things that they can't explain or understand well what they saw, that basically zip right by them. And then a whole bunch of ghost hunters trying to get a government handout. That's really what's been going on. If you want to look into this more, I'm going to recommend a couple sources. So when it comes to analyzing the videos, Mick West of Metabunk has done probably the most in accumulating rational, evidence-based explanations of what's going on that excludes aliens as the best choice. More close friend of mine, Jason Colavito, who's been researching ancient alien stuff for decades and has written up a few things for news media such to basically show the money trail, what's going on there. Green Street, I'm forgetting his first name, but he's at the New York Post, who's actually done some good investigations as well, also following the money, doing, talking to the people who run these searches, doing some gonzo journalism, and basically showing over and over again, it's a nothing burger, and it's the same people just showing up over and over again who have been doing paranormal research for the government since the 1980s. Like Project Stargate, where they thought they were doing all sorts of men who stare at goat stuff. It's the same people behind this UAP stuff, or some of the same people. It's a circle jerk with a very small circle. But that's another story for another time. We got other callers to chat to. So I see 4 callers on the line. We got several atheist callers. One has been waiting for almost half an hour. So how about we bring in Marissa, goes by she, them, an atheist in Utah. Marissa, am I saying your name correctly, and can you hear us?
Yes and yes.
Super duper. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay. My question is, I was instructed to come to you on SkepTalk. I was hoping to speak with Forrest yesterday about this question, but what is your take on the validity of ancient giant beasts? What Paulogia brought up yesterday was in reference to like King Kong, just giant creatures that once walked the earth aside from dinosaurs.
Got
I'm
an
not
example?
believing. I'm sorry?
Got an example?
Well, as I told Paulogia yesterday, I've come across a lot of videos where uh, giant creatures or giant rock formations that are shaped like animals that we have today.
You're not talking about Mudville University, are you?
I couldn't tell you what that is.
Okay. All right. So
When
give
you say
me.
giant
So now
creatures-
we're not
in
talking about
such
giant
things.
creatures that used to walk with Earth. Now about pareidolia, about rock formations.
Correct.
Okay. What about them?
I was just curious what your take is on the validity of them.
On the validity of rocks that look like animals. I would say that there's the same
No.
validity as clouds that look like Godzilla.
Fair enough. Like I said, I was just instructed by people on the chat yesterday to bring this up in SkepTalk because you guys might have more of a detailed response.
To what?
Well, maybe to
you
help
really haven't
us,
gotten a question.
Yeah, Marissa, do you have a particular example of what you're going at? So that might help us narrow down what you think.
See, there is this
Well,
group
like
called
I
Mud
said,
Fossil University. I think it's called Mud Fossil University, where they say that giant rock formations or hillsides that look like animals are really those animals, just sleeping. Like in old 1970s episodes of Godzilla. If the mountain looks like Godzilla, it's Godzilla. And he's asleep. And something might wake it up.
yeah, no, I don't believe that they are creatures that just went to sleep. I'm just thinking, or I'm just curious if there is any truth to these creatures once existing, such as creatures as big as King Kong, like King Kong, but they don't exist anymore.
Okay, well, as I said, if you have an example, because, I mean, some dinosaurs got really big, okay? Some of them.
Okay.
But, I mean, they have all kinds of mechanisms in their bodies that allow them to get really big. Other animals don't have that. Gorillas can't be that big.
So you don't think that there was ever any form of giant creatures like that?
Giant creatures like what? Like Godzilla and King Kong? Neither of those are possible. So we know those didn't exist. You have an example that somebody ever actually talked about?
No, not exactly.
Okay.
It's also worth
I'm
noting
sorry,
that it just helps that there's a little bit something concrete that we can sink our teeth into if we're just talking in the abstract. So, for example, could it be possible that there was ever a 30-foot human? And we would say no to that because we actually know enough about scaling laws that a human like that would just collapse under their own weight. They couldn't even have blood circulate through their legs without their veins exploding. Their bones couldn't hold up the weight, things like that. So you can't just take any body and just make it twice as big or 3 times as big and expect it to survive. So in general, you can't just take that thing over there and say, but bigger. Big things have all sorts of very special adaptations for them to actually survive like that, or have to basically live in the water to hold up their weight like the blue whale.
Yeah. Now, there were some big things.
Okay.
There were some ichthyosaurs. There was an ichthyosaur that might have been as big as a blue whale. There was a Pericitus, I think it is. There was a a basilosaurid whale way back around 34 million years ago that was also quite large, might have been close to the size of a blue whale. Other people talk about how there were once giant insects, but unfortunately, no, they were not. I mean, there was one or two that are notable that were massive, like a dragonfly, a griffinfly technically, with a wingspan of like almost 2 feet. But that was extraordinary. Everything else was more or less regular size. The largest spider known to science exists today. It's not in the fossil record. People used to think that they were giant spiders and giant. Well, there was also a giant scorpion. There really was. There was a scorpion that was up to 4 feet long once upon a time, Brontoscorpio and a few others. But you don't have anything like in the movies from the 1950s, scorpions the sizes, or praying mantis big enough to eat an airplane or whatever.
Yes, of course. I've always been taught that there is always some truth to all myths.
Yeah, disavow yourself of that. Just cure yourself of that assumption all the way. There is almost always some lie, even to the truth. So whatever is true, you probably still understand something about it incorrectly. Even if it's true, there's probably something wrong with our concept of it.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you much.
Thank you for calling in.
Well, have a good night. Absolutely.
You as well.
Bye.
Okay. When I hear giant creatures, I have to wonder, if I were being chased by a giant sloth, how fast would I have to run to escape that untimely death?
Yeah. I mean, examples of giant, there was the giant sloth, which contests some Indian elephants in size today. So that's pretty big, I'll grant. But there's a chance that the largest mammal ever in history might have been another form of elephant, Paleoloxodon, which was close to the biggest confirmed mammal ever, and that was the Paraceratherium, a hornless rhinoceros that really was enormous. It was 18 foot at the shoulder, just magnificently huge. I could walk directly underneath it with my head passed below its belly button. So that's big.
Oh yeah. Yes. I dropped the call. We're just summing up, but we should also carry on because we do have a couple theist calls. So, mind you, for those who are new to the show, we tend to prioritize callers that are believers in God, so we can discuss that. So, I'm going to pop in Jacob, pronouns he, him, coming in from Arizona. And apparently science is telling him something interesting. So, Jacob, can you hear us?
Hello, yes I can.
All right, Jacob, what do you want to chat about tonight?
So, tiny bit of background. My worldview is essentially survival of the fittest, but arguments. So I, put arguments up against each other. I think there is an objective way to analyze stronger or weaker arguments, and I just always take the stronger. And essentially what I call the truth is arguments that seemingly can't be torn down. But obviously I would change my mind in a minute if they could be. So I'm currently a theist, but I don't believe in the Bible or anything like that. Okay. I'm curious about. So yeah, the science thing is basically are we in agreement that entropy is a thing, and that essentially, if we play out what's happening in the universe, eventually the universe is going to, die a heat death. There's going to be no more energy left.
Yeah, that is the theory.
So
That's our
that's
best
true.
projection, though with one caveat. It's not that we're going to run out of energy, it's that we will run out of useful energy, energy that can do work. So there'll still be energy, but it'll be so diffuse, spread out, and even that you can do two things with it, diddly and squat. That's the projection or the extreme future of the universe.
So, in other words,
Interesting.
we're not going to, it's not like electrons are going to, get weary and start going slow. It's not like magnets are going to stop working either.
So like no more fusion will occur, that kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would it be safe to say then that like none of anyone's actions in all of human history, ours included, will have any bearing on that outcome? Like even if we, the best case scenario for humanity, we're able to like create Dyson spheres and travel the universe, and like essentially, even if we get that far, still we're all going to be met with the same fate, and humanity will go extinct along with everything else, right?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then is your moral position essentially that morality is not real?
What would morality have to do? How is that in any way related to what you just said, or to the topic in general?
So I feel like an argument you'd have to make in order for you to say, oh, well, like this action was not justified, or it's bad, or you're deserving of punishment for it.
What is morality? How do you determine whether something is moral or not?
I mean, you would need essentially an axiom to go off of.
What?
So yeah, you would need an axiom.
What would you need?
At some point, an axiom.
An axiom, he says.
Okay. To what?
So like a basic moral premise.
Okay, so what is your basic moral premise to tell whether something is moral or not?
I mean, it depends on... I mean, are you asking how I answer that question?
You're going to evaluate a decision being made by some organization that you work for, and you're going to tell them whether that is a moral thing to do. How do you determine whether it is moral or not?
I mean, in my mind, it's going to have to do with like human suffering or not.
That would be a good one, yeah. Because the only way that I can translate morality from my understanding is whether we are being pro-social or whether we're being anti-social. Are we having compassion for other people and empathy, or are we being apathetic and selfish? Are we visiting cruelty upon other people just for our own ends and not caring about them? Because that would be immoral, right? So
from an atheist perspective, wouldn't it be true that that's just not zooming out far enough? That it's like,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Something you would call immoral is just ultimately meaningless. Like it isn't going to change what happens at all in any way. Like whether you're
right, my saving the life of a child and prolonging the happiness of that family has nothing to do with and no relevance to the heat death of the universe. Our species will be extinct long before the end of the universe.
Sure. But my argument would be once the lives of those people have passed, won't it not have mattered? Like you could have
no, because it mattered when it mattered. Whether you have enough money to put in your gas tank to make it where you need to go matters until you get there. And then when next week when you get paid or whatever, you're no longer facing that emergency. Well, it no longer matters then. What definitely mattered now.
So your argument would be like making this decision, this morally, what you would consider a morally wrong decision is wrong because it matters now, but ultimately it's the exact same as a morally good decision in your estimation.
Nothing that really matters now, that really matters and really matters now, is going to matter 5 billion years from now. Nothing about human society that really does matter now. None of that is going to matter.
So my question
5
would
billion
be,
years
my question would be why would one choice be better than another then?
Because one induces suffering.
Different direction. Yeah.
So what was your definition? Your definition of morality was based on human suffering. Yes.
I mean,
so the decisions you're making are Are they
Yeah, I mean, like,
prolonging life? Are they minimizing, harm or suffering or whatever? Or are they
but
perpetuating
I'm
it?
essentially operating off the idea that it will matter only because if it doesn't matter, then I fail to see how everything doesn't just fall apart. Like logically.
I fail
let
to
me-
see why it would fall apart.
Yeah.
You're not making sense. If something
Let's
matters
actually
now,
try
and it
this from
really
a different
matters now.
angle.
If
Let's
you're
try this
there
from a
in
different-
time, if you're there in time to see a baby carriage roll off into the street, and you're able to save that baby from being hit by a car, that matters right now. 5 billion years from now, when our species is extinct, that will not matter then, but it matters
I guess
now.
a question would arise like, why would suffering be bad in a world that it ultimately there's going to be no change in, like, whether you and I suffer
Well,
the
let's
most we
see.
possibly
Do you
could
want to suffer?
or
You're
none.
going to live X number of years, right?
Sure, yeah.
Does it matter whether you live those years happily or whether you suffer in perpetuity until you die?
Yeah, it's almost like you're saying, like I would say I care and I want it to matter, but if we're saying that ultimately the result is the exact same, it's almost like we're multiplying by 0 or something. It sort of doesn't matter what you put in X, the result is the same.
Here's the thing, though.
So
I think it's worth noting that even though the end result, if I may,
what do you matter 5
the
billion years from now?
Well, I mean, my hope would be that there's some non-physical component to us that is not going to die along with the universe.
Yeah, there's not.
Well, I mean,
there's not. We know that there's no such thing as a soul. But do you agree that you matter now?
I don't know. I hope.
But are you saying it's okay with you if we just toss you off a bridge into traffic? That's okay with you?
No, but
so you matter now, right? Right?
Well, whether I would prefer if you do that or not, I don't know if that means if I matter or not. Like, if it is true that...
And what does it have to do with morality?
Well, if your decisions don't matter at all, if the outcome is always the same...
my decisions do matter. They won't matter 5 billion years from now, but they matter now. They matter when they matter. Matters of human interaction, matters of social construct. These matter to those matters. They're not going to matter when there is no matter.
So, like, if you were, like, a really morally bad person by your approximation for, like, your whole life, and then you die, and then that's it.
If I'm a really
everyone dies, and that's it.
Hold on. If I'm a really what? I'm a really what person?
Morally bad.
Morally bad.
If you
let's define what that is. What is a morally bad person?
Well, that's what I said, by your estimation.
No, but I need you to define it now, because you're the one that's coming up with all this and not understanding what I say. So I need to know where your head is. What is a morally bad person?
Based on, I don't know if it matters for the question, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like it would have to depend on, like, it being relevant at some point. Like, in my best guess of a worldview, I would say something like, if you make morally bad decisions now...
How do we know the decision is morally bad?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay, that's the big problem religion has. Religion has never figured out how to tell whether something is morally bad. That's why they still believe in a God that is morally bad.
Well, and, I don't subscribe to the Bible or anything,
because my definition of morally bad would be something that was, apathetic, callous, cruel, selfish, vindictive, always into, that it's a narcissist that's always into retribution. That's evil. Now, whether you call it God or whether you call it Trump, that's still evil either way.
Don't you think those would all ultimately be circular, like digging all down into them? Like,
why?
What does it mean to be apathetic?
Why? How would it be circular?
Well, because ultimately
you're pro-social or you're anti-social. How is that circular?
I mean, couldn't we imagine a group of people where being pro-social with them, you would look at it and be like, oh, that's terrible.
Why would I imagine that? How
I don't
could
know,
I
couldn't we
imagine that?
imagine a society where socializing involves, cruelty to other people, having them suffer,
No,
whatever? I don't know.
because society can't sustain that way. We humans are a social species. The reason we have morality is because we depend on society, which in turn depends on us to cohabitate productively. So we had to work certain norms in. We had to figure out who we can trust, who stands by their word, who can be relied upon, and who is just going to be apathetic and selfish. And the people who are apathetic and selfish have dysfunctional mirror neurons or underdeveloped prefrontal lobes or whatever their issue is, are going to be eliminated from society, either by being banished or imprisoned or killed. And so what we end up with is the people who stand by their word, who can be relied upon, who do care about other people. These are the ones that are being favored by our society. These are the ones that are being honored. And so what we end up with over population mechanics is we end up with an evolutionary selective trend toward compassion for our family, friends, and fellows. So that's what morality is.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely might be. I think, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to change gears here. I think this subject, we could talk about this forever and maybe not resolve what I'm trying to resolve. But you did say one thing about, souls or, magic or whatever, that I'm kind of curious to get your opinion on, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So there's like a thought experiment, this is just philosophy 101 stuff that I've learned in college. And, it's like, imagine a chair, right? And then the question after that is, can you see the chair? And I'm curious, if I ask you, imagine a chair, and then I ask the question after that, can you see the chair? What is your answer to that?
If you asked me to imagine the chair, and your follow-up question is something along the lines of, am I now imagining a chair? Okay,
Sure.
I may say, yes, I'm imagining a chair. I might also answer, no, I'm busy with other things. But let's assume for the moment that I'm following your guide, and I'll say, okay, I'm imagining a chair. Now what?
Well, do you think the word see is being used inappropriately there? Do you think like the experience you have in your mind is not like vision?
If we understand the context so that we are able to communicate, and I know that when you say see, that you're not asking if I literally see, but if I'm envisioning in my mind a chair, then as long as I understand the context implied, then yeah, we're not, that's not inappropriate.
Yeah, but I mean, you even use the word envisioning, right? Like it's almost like we have to call upon sight because it matches the phenomenon.
Well, you're asking me to, you are literally asking me to envision a chair. To imagine a chair means to picture it in my mind. So I now need a picture, a visualization. Yeah. I can't come up with, yes, I hear a chair. I'm not going to tell you that I now smell a chair.
No, that's true. Yeah. No, I'm seeing if we can move. So like if we can establish that, the word see is being used appropriately there. My question would just be then, like, I'm assuming you think that experience of you imagining the chair is a result of like your brain chemistry, right?
You're asking me to do something. I'm expecting that you're going to lead to a point.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that it may be a point worth going through the challenge to envision the chair. Now what is the punchline, or what is the conclusion? What is the quandary or the conundrum? Whatever it is that you want to get to, I'm envisioning a chair. Now what?
Yeah. So the phenomenon of that is very strange, and questions about that become very strange. And I don't know if they're easily answerable in physical means. So like,
how?
The question is like, so the image of that chair, right?
I'm not imagining a strange chair.
No, I know, a normal chair. Do you think that there are like atoms or particles or whatever arranged in, a chair shape in your brain?
If I'm
somewhere?
envisioning a chair, what a chair looks like, I will also envision what that chair might feel like. And of course, if it's a chair at all, then it's going to be made out of atoms. No, in my mind, it's not made out of atoms. But if I'm envisioning a chair, then I'm envisioning a chair that I assume will also be made out of atoms if it was a real chair.
Yeah, but so you're saying you
Do
can
you have
envision
a
the chair,
place
and
you're
I
trying to
believe
get
you.
here?
I mean, it's your show. If you don't want to hear me out, you don't have to hear me out.
Oh, how long
But-
do I have to hear you out to find out if you have a point to make? That was my
I'm trying
question.
to make my point, but you haven't. You didn't
Okay.
address my question. You just
How long
went
will
to a
it
meta
take to
conversation.
get to your point?
It should be like 2 minutes if you just follow my questions.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Okay.
Go.
So you say you envision the chair, you imagine it in your mind. I have a very similar experience. I don't doubt I don't doubt that you're telling the truth when you say that. But like, where is the image of that chair? It's not like literally physically in your
my
brain,
mind.
right?
Yes, physically in my brain.
So is the mind physical?
Physical? Yes.
Okay, so then that vision or that image of a chair must be like located somewhere, right?
The mind it's built in synapses. So although it is an illusion only in my mind, it's like a drawing or a painting would be the apparition of a chair. It's not a real chair. It's a depiction of a chair. That's what's going on in my mind. But the depiction, whether it's made out of paint or whether it's made out of pixels or what have you, this is still an apparition of a chair that's meant to represent a real chair. It is not a chair, but it's meant to represent a real chair.
So, like, you have a place where you can envision, like, any number of things. You could imagine that same chair made of, rainbows and waterfalls. But wherever that place
That reminds
is,
me
your
of my
mind
toilet.
is like that is your brain. You're saying, but also at the same time, you're saying so that experience is in my brain, but it can't be located.
Why can it
Or
not
can
be
it?
located? What do you mean it can't be located?
Where would it be if I asked? Like, where is it?
Well, I know a neurosurgeon. If you want to, you can talk to Chris Thompson. He can ask you exactly where in the brain these types of images would be formed.
That would be
They've
fascinating.
mapped out brain activity pretty well.
But so like, wouldn't we see something like firing neurons, right? We wouldn't see like a chair,
Of course.
right?
That's right. You wouldn't
But
be able to, you wouldn't see a chair.
chair.
Although I have seen research, it's over a decade old now, where they have been trying to work the brain so that they can produce images produced by the mind and translate that into a visual image. They haven't had a lot of success yet, but I know they've been making the attempt.
Would you think it's safe to say if we can never do that, then we might have to acknowledge there's some non-physical aspect?
No. Not only is there no evidence, zero evidence for the thing you're pleading for, there is substantial evidence against the thing you're pleading for.
I'm not pleading for it. I think I'm calling your attention to a phenomenon.
Yes, you are.
And I feel like okay.
Yes, you are. You're pleading for a non-material mind. You're pleading for an immaterial soul. And no, there's no evidence for it. There's substantial evidence against it. Yes, the mind is physical. The chair exists physically as an apparition in my mind. There are places where you can identify where the chair exists in my physical brain.
So when you say you envision it, do we have some sort of like, I don't know, mind eye or something? Like, where is that vision taking place?
How dumb can you make a question, especially after you've already had it answered before you asked it?
All right.
As I just said a moment ago, if you talk to a neuroscientist, like I just suggested, someone that I know that does neuroscience, I've interviewed several neuroscientists on this. They have mapped out brain activity pretty well to know what happens where. So if you want to get into the specifics about where in the brain an envisioning would take place, then you should talk to one of them. I'm happy with the explanation that yes, we have these synapses. They occur in different places in the gray matter, usually in the frontal lobes. So all of this for the higher order thinking skills, whether it's left brain, right brain, I don't know in this case. Doesn't really matter to me. It's not what I study. You asked me about morality. I study that. I think I can manage that one pretty well. What matters today won't matter 5 billion years from now, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't matter today.
Yeah, but isn't there something about if it ultimately doesn't matter, how much does it matter?
No.
So you don't think it's like
If you
arbitrary?
failed
Like
to
you're
save
just
that baby,
defining
you
it
still
however you
failed
want?
to save that baby 5 billion years from now.
Well, yeah, no, that is true. Yeah, if I failed to save it, I would have failed to save
And
it.
it's still, your conundrum still has no relevance to morality.
Well, I mean, I
Whether
think on some level it
we
does.
matter 5 billion years from now, or whether we're extinct 5 billion years from now, either way does not have any relevance or impact to whatever is moral today, or that
I
matters
mean,
today.
fair enough, but it's like it matters right now, and then it doesn't matter. And then I guess my question would be, how much does it actually matter if that's all it is? But I mean,
As I just
you know,
said, if it matters, if you have to get somewhere, and do you have enough gas to get there? You know, in the time that you need to do the thing you need to do, did you make it? Were you able to do the thing and save the day? Then it matters. Will the
no.
same thing matter tomorrow? Well, you're not going to have the same issue tomorrow, but it matters today.
So I mean, but you would acknowledge though that if we take your framework and say, we could either have a society full of people who care about this and act accordingly,
Or we won't
could
have a society
of
at
people
all.
Who
That's
sure,
it. We either have a society.
They completely.
We either have a society that has compassion for the people, or we don't have a society at all.
But we both acknowledge that those stories end the exact same.
No. If we
Okay.
have a society in which we have compassionate people, then we get to persist happily for quite some time. If we don't have compassion for other people, we won't have a society at all.
So I
And
said
we
they
will
end
hurry
the
our
same.
extinction along.
So you're deciding
So
the end is
I have
before
this
the actual
problem with,
end.
I've heard this argument before. It was the most morose argument I've ever heard in my life. There was a guy that had me on a movie called My Week in Atheism. And I caught this guy giving a sermon to his own congregation, wherein he described that if what he does today doesn't matter 5 billion years from now, if he doesn't personally still exist himself 5 billion years from now, then there's no reason to limit suffering or prolong life. You may as well just kill people or just let them die in agony and have no compassion or feeling at all, because I can't still matter 5 billion years from now. That's sick. And this man
That's not what I'm
had the
saying.
gall to criticize me for being, what was a nihilist. He, the Christian preacher, was the most nihilistic, in his definition, the most nihilistic person I'd ever heard in my life. That was the most morose perspective. It's dark.
You're
it's
saying
bleak.
you're a nihilist?
His definition of a nihilist is not mine.
Oh, okay.
So he believes that a nihilist is somebody that doesn't believe in anything or believes in nothing or and doesn't care about anything, which is not what a nihilist is. Yeah. So for me,
what's your definition?
A nihilist is one who doesn't believe that. We believe that if you want there to be a purpose in your life, you have to figure out what that purpose is going to be. There is no purpose or meaning of life externally imposed from somewhere else.
Fair enough, but I mean, isn't it all arbitrary then? And I feel like we don't operate like that as a society. Like,
what's arbitrary?
We don't say, like just self-defined.
What do you mean I'm self-defined? I don't understand.
What's meaningful or not is just determined by each individual, and they could be entirely different. And that
do you have a meaning to your life that is imposed upon you? Like, what is the meaning of life for everybody? No, we don't have. There is no meaning of life. There was no pre-planned arrangement. There was no thing that said, God says, okay, I'm going to create gazillions of people so they can kiss my ass for the rest of time. And that'll be their purpose, to tell me how great I am because I'm so inexplicably insecure that I need these peon ants to tell me how wonderful I am. No, we don't believe that.
But you would agree if
life emerged as a natural consequence of complex chemistry. There was no plan for it. There's no destiny. And the only thing we can do is make the best of what we've got, continue on as happily as we can for as long as we can. And that's it. And some people, for whatever reason, and I genuinely do not understand this, some people like yourself cannot accept that, one, that they'll die one day and really, really, really die, and that, two, our species will go extinct at some point, and that there won't be any more humanity left. I don't know why that's a problem for you.
I don't have a problem with that. If that's true, it's true. And
well, you definitely do. You've had 30 minutes worth of a problem with that.
But you're saying that because I have arguments that I think might be, I would never even argue that I think these things are 100% true. My argument would be that if they aren't true, I can't see how anything makes any sense. Like, it seems like all arguments.
I get that you can't see how anything makes any sense. And listening to your argument, I empathize. I can't make sense of it either.
May I try?
Yes.
Jacob, I am going to take us out of morality and take us into the world of cold, hard cash. Completely amoral money.
Sounds good.
All right. So, we use dollars in this world of ours for lots of things, especially here in the good old US of A. Tell me what you think is more valuable, $1 or $2?
$2.
All right, straightforward. Okay. How about $1 today versus $1 next week? Which one of those is more valuable to you?
$1 today.
Isn't it a cheeseburger today? Oh, never mind.
Sorry, Popeye reference there, yeah. Okay, but it sounds like, yeah, $1 today is worth more than $1 a week from now. Why is that?
I mean, there's actual inflation, but also just the idea that having $1 now, you can get value out of that, whereas $1 a week from now, you can get no value out of. Which, if you had
all right
the value today, you can, all sorts of things.
Yeah, and let's project that even further forward. What do you think is more valuable, $1 a week from now or $1 a year from now? And excluding inflation.
$1 a week from now. Oh, okay, yeah.
So as time goes on,
true,
the value of a thing seems to go down because the more and more that you don't have access to it. So it actually will follow like what economists will call as a discount rate. That will basically mean that money has an exponentially decreasing value the further into the future you get possible access to it. I would say a similar thing here would be happening about our future bazillions of years from now. What happens in a bazillion years is basically the same sort of thing as saying, I will give you $100 trillion in a billion years. I might as well be saying I'm giving you nothing.
Fair enough.
And conversely, that means you agree that things now matter more than things in a little bit in the future, the far future, and the extreme far future. The things here and now matter a whole lot, no matter what the value of the infinite universe in the future might be.
True, but my rebuttal would be that it's still all of the things now will all lead to the same end. But
here's the thing. That would require you to go back on what you said, that $1 now is worth more than $1 in a week.
Would it?
Those things won't be consistent. You can't say that the thing will have no value because in the future it'll have no value when it clearly has value right now and more value than it does right now than it will in the future.
Okay, I kind of see what you're saying now. So yeah, it would be like saying 1,000 years from now, we're going to light all money on fire. So it doesn't matter if you have any money now.
No, we're going to do that in about 6 months.
I hope not. Yeah. But like I said, this is just an economic sort of thing where we say, hey, things that are closer to us in time are more valuable than things far away. And I think the same thing will be true if we're talking about things in our moral dimension. Things that affect us and we affect here and now matter even more than the equal things affecting in a year or 10 years or 1,000 years from now. And if you take that logic and put it forward, you'll realize, hey, even if there's no value in a bazillion years, that does not mean there is no value right now. And just put it another way. Jacob, did you have breakfast this morning?
No, but I had lunch.
Okay, so nonetheless you ate today. Okay, why would you do something like that if in a billion years your corpse will still be evaporated into nothing but dust?
I mean, I would argue that if I knew that were true, then it wouldn't matter.
Oh, I
Like,
know your body
I could,
will be dust in a billion years.
But you do know that that's true.
well, I mean, you would have to admit that, like, if
You're
God
going to be
came down
dead in
tomorrow,
100
like,
years. There's no way around
no,
that.
for sure.
So why bother
100%.
eating today?
Well, would you change your mind if tomorrow God came down from the heavens and satisfied your belief in Him in any way you requested? Like, would you change your mind?
I think I would probably need therapy and maybe Thorazine. I'm not sure.
But given what you're saying, if new evidence,
what happens? Will I also get a visit from Santa Claus?
Well, so your position isn't just that you think that atheism is the strongest argument at this point. It's that you wouldn't believe in God.
God is not even a possibility.
Given anything, there's no possible set of circumstances that could arise.
That's right.
God
is not even a possibility. We know we don't have souls, therefore there can be no afterlife.
If you would change your mind if tomorrow it became
okay.
possible.
Would I change my mind if I had some kind of phantasm that convinces? If I have blunt force trauma or something goes terribly wrong with my faculties, I might end up believing in things that are not true again.
But what if it were like persistent? Like you could begin to rule out things like.
I've met lots of people that have persistent delusions, and they're persistently wrong, and they can never accept it, and they never admit it, and so they never realize it.
So, but you think that like it just seems very unscientific that if you were presented with a bunch of evidence, you wouldn't change your mind. But
excuse me,
whatever.
I have, past tense, been presented with a whole fuck ton of evidence against God. Now, you want to weigh that against the evidence for God, which is nothing, donut, Zippo?
Yeah. But if it were tomorrow that all of a sudden that were flipped, it's just a hypothetical.
Okay, so if tomorrow I suffer the same delusion that you do, okay, then what?
Why you gotta be mean about it?
I'm sorry, what?
Where's your pro-social opinions? Why can't you attack my arguments?
I'm trying to help you as best I can. That's how I'm pro-social. I'm trying to free you of delusion. Trying to get you to think rationally, where you're determined not to.
Yeah, I love thinking rationally. I'd love to be wrong.
Okay, so if you think rationally, then you would not hold a position that there is a God unless you had compelling evidence that there was one, and that compelling evidence could not be contradicted by equal or better evidence against it. But you don't have any evidence for God. All you have is evidence against it, which you are choosing to ignore. So you are being irrational, illogical.
I think that my belief in a God is not that I think there is evidence for it. It's that I think.
Okay, so you just told me you had evidence, and that I was ignoring the evidence for God.
No, that was hypothetical evidence.
Okay, so we still mutually agree there is no evidence of God, and therefore asking me what would happen if tomorrow I met Peter Pan or Bugs Bunny or Darth Vader or Santa Claus, that's kind of a null question, isn't it?
Not really. I mean, we
okay. So what happens if tomorrow you meet Darth Vader?
I don't know.
Bugs Bunny. Tomorrow you will meet Bugs Bunny. I want to put that in a more reasonable comparison to God. So Bugs Bunny is far more reasonable comparison to God.
So you're saying it wouldn't matter if God existed or not.
It really doesn't.
Okay. Well, I don't know if that's true. I feel like it could be really consequential.
Well, let me help you out with this. Whether God exists or not, okay, either way, evolution is still a demonstrable fact of population genetics, fossils, and phylogeny, and all of the scriptures of every religion are man-made mythology with no truth in them. That's even if there is a God. So, how is God relevant? There's no afterlife. We don't have souls. So how is God relevant there?
Well, if you were mistaken about that, it would be relevant, right?
Well, if I was mistaken, but in reality, there is no evidence for God. There is only evidence against God. We know we don't have souls. We have all this evidence against souls, nothing to indicate that a soul is even possible, nothing to indicate that a God is even possible, everything to indicate that both are made up. So, yeah, I'm not wrong about that.
Yeah, my argument for God would not be, here's some evidence I have. It would be, I don't think we can construct
What a
a
surprise.
rational worldview in which we all...
The problem I have is
but-
you're telling me at the same time, you're telling me that you're rational and that you believe something completely without any evidence at all, which is the opposite of rational.
So you think that, like, if I made some argument about, like, you know, what gravity must be like on Venus or something, or no, I would have to go further, somewhere where we have no direct evidence, you would say, well, it's completely irrational to believe that gravity would work that way, even though we know
it would be
physics and all
completely
this other stuff.
irrational to have a firm belief about something you can't know anything about.
Wait, when did I say my
You get
belief
that?
is firm? I prefaced this whole thing with I'd
It's a
change it with
belief.
presented with a
By
stronger argument
definition,
immediately.
it's firm. By definition, a belief is firm. Now, if you were saying, taking a neutral position, maybe it's true, maybe it isn't. I'm not convinced either way. Let's say you take that position. That's fine. That maybe there's a God. I'm open to evidence for it. Never seen any, only ever seen evidence against it. You would have to come up with so much evidence for God that it actually counters all the evidence we have against it. I don't think that's going to happen, but I'm open to the possibility. If that was a possibility, you have to show me that God is even a possibility to consider, which means that you have to have a precedent or a parallel or verified phenomenon indicating that such possibility exists. You don't even have that. All you have
I see what
is a
you're saying.
determination to believe something that is not evidently true and a refusal to accept that it's not evidently true while pretending that you're rational and proving that you're irrational.
But it's not a refusal, right? Because I'd be perfectly willing to change my mind, 2 seconds from now, 5 minutes from now. I have no
Okay, well,
allegiance
why
to any of
haven't
this
you?
stuff.
Why haven't you already?
Because I don't think I've been presented with a stronger argument.
Okay, what do you need?
And on some level, I'm
Let's just
essentially
start with this.
unwilling to
From my
get rid of
perspective,
things in my life
if
that-
I
I'm
believe,
sorry.
if I am convinced that X is true, and I'm convinced of X
Uh-huh.
because of Y argument or something I read or whatever that I understand to be the case, and then I
Mhm.
find out that whatever I read was not actually based on fact, that it was based on speculation, that the reports that I thought were a fact were not actually the case, that they were misrepresented. In other words, I realized that the evidence that I was basing my position on was not good enough to make that assumption in the first place. I already don't believe it. You don't have to prove it wrong. It's enough to know that there wasn't good enough reason to believe it was correct. You are beginning from the position of already knowing that you don't have good enough reason to believe that it is correct, but you're determined to believe it anyway. That's irrational.
But I'm not. The only reason I believe it is it's the current strongest argument I've been presented. And
No, the only reason
I
you
feel
believe
like
it is because
all-
you have an emotional attachment, which you spent 30 minutes explaining why nothing
All
would
right.
make sense to you if it doesn't perpetually continue to exist for billions upon billions of years. If you die forever, for good, lights out, game over, operating system not found. If you ever die, then nothing makes sense, and there's no reason to be moral to anybody because nothing matters. I can't continue to be existent forever. Then I just may as well just let that baby die. That's your argument. It's irrational.
No,
it's
it's not.
emotional. It's not based on fact. It's not based on reason. It's
All right,
entirely
well,
selfish.
I think it is, but it seems like you're determined to not. Are you?
It's not my determination. You're the one who sat here and lied and told me that you would be ready, open to the possibility to admit that you're wrong in 2 seconds.
Well, hold
Yet you
on.
already
So,
know. You already know. You can't
So
give
you're-
any evidence
I
to
could
believe the
accuse
thing
you
you
of the same
believe.
thing.
You can't even show a possibility to consider. And you already know that there is substantial
I told
evidence,
you
even if
how
you
I
don't yet know
arrived
what
at
it
it,
is.
which
You know
is
that there's
not-
substantial evidence against all of your conclusions.
I told you already. I didn't arrive at this because I found a piece of evidence. It's because all other worldviews
I know
appear
that.
to be irrational.
I believe
Okay.
I just
Jacob,
said that to you.
I think we should probably
Okay.
wrap up because the call has been going for a bit, but I think maybe
Fair
the
enough.
key
Yeah.
thing
Fair
we need
enough.
to go away
I
with this
appreciate your
is
time.
Jacob. Yeah, the one thing, Jacob, is we have seen many arguments and people can argue anything, but what has made science in particular successful is saying argue is fine, but let's go out and actually test it, see where the evidence actually stacks, because people have been arguing until they're blue in the face for thousands of years and made no progress. And then science came along and said, let's actually test that shit. And that's how we actually figured out how things work far more successfully.
Yeah.
So I think
The
for
summary
future
is-
discussions, let's be fact-based as much as possible.
The summary
Fair
is
enough.
whether
I,
truth matters. If the truth matters to you, then you're not going to believe something that might not be true. You're going to try to abstain from being convinced until the evidence is so overwhelming that it compels an acceptance. That's not your situation.
Yeah, that is, but I know you don't believe that, and that's all right. I don't think I'm going to convince
And I
you in
know
the
I know
30
better
seconds
because
I
you've
have
already
here.
admitted it. You've already said there's no evidence. And yet you believe it anyway.
Well, evidence in the sense that, yeah, no, I can't bring you a study or any data. Yeah.
There's not a single fact, not one objectively verifiable bit of data that is positively indicative of and or exclusively concordant with the God conclusion. Nothing. That's it. Nada. There's neither any actual factual evidence nor logically valid arguments either. All of the best arguments that the best apologists have come up with have all been based on logical fallacies. Every last one of them. You got
All right,
nothing.
well,
You got less
I
than nothing.
disagree, but I understand.
Well, Jacob, like I say, we
appreciate
can
your
try
time.
focusing on something a little bit fact-based, but by the way, our next caller, I think, will try to provide the evidence that you might find useful, but we'll save that for our next discussion. So, Jacob,
Good
please
luck,
have a
next
good
caller.
night, and
Yep.
we'll probably have to convene again. All right.
Yep. Have a good evening.
Good night. All right. So, I am looking at our list of callers, and we do have another theist caller that has a natural theology argument for God. So this person might be
Okay.
bringing in the evidence we're really looking for. So I am going to bring in PK. Pronouns he, him, comes from New York. And PK, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, PK, you said you got some natural theology for us, so take it away.
Yeah, so have you watched a show called Dragon Ball Z?
I've watched clips.
I do remember in the
aware of the show.
1990s there was some kids cartoon that, if I remember correctly, there was a girl dressed in a Playboy cocktail outfit, and she was part of that show. Is that the same show? I was trying to figure out why there was a children's cartoon that had a main character dressed like a Playboy cocktail waitress. I think that was Dragon Ball Z.
Did you have like blue hair or something? I mean, there's Bulma.
I don't know that I noticed hair, and in a cartoon I probably wouldn't have noticed it if it was blue.
Okay.
Nonetheless, what about Dragon Ball Z? Or
Playboy
Dragon Ball
cocktail
more generally?
waitress in a children's cartoon. That's what I remember.
All right. This conversation is already over 9,000.
Yep.
PK, were you just hit with a Kamehameha? You lost your breath.
Yeah. I'm once again. I'm
Okay,
going to
so-
suggest not so many gummies.
All right.
Yeah, I was going to ask about. So yeah, I was going to talk about Cell.
PK, maybe we should try another time. It sounds like you might be a little bit indisposed.
Yep.
No, it's about asexual versus sexual reproduction, and why one overtook the other. So do you think that's
What?
the fluke of nature?
Why did sexual reproduction dominate over asexual? Is that your question?
Yeah, I mean, like bacteria. Can,
Disease resistance.
Yeah, bacteria can like get like resistance to our medicine pretty quickly. So it's like, why didn't
Yeah,
asexual?
but bacteria doesn't use sexual reproduction. Bacteria is asymmetrical. We're talking about disease resistance. So there are certain vertebrates that will switch back and forth from asexual to sexual reproduction, and they do this when they're normally asexual. There's like certain kind of cichlid fish, if I remember, in ponds in Mexico, that they normally reproduce asexually unless there's a disease infectant involved, and then they switch to sexual reproduction because that enables a faster evolution to resist the disease infection.
Okay, that's in the minority though. That's like probably like
That's
very
what?
few can do that.
It's also worth noting, PK, that there also are many bacteria that actually swap genomes. They basically do some DNA swapping. It's not quite the same as sex, but it's the same ultimate purpose of by sharing the genes around, you get better, you get more combinations and more opportunities to have traits spread through a population that are successful. That's the main reason sex drives things. You might even say there's a sex drive.
Okay, I mean, bacteria can do it without that too, right? So it's like, why isn't there like a 50%?
Yes, but the bacteria doesn't
species,
suffer
and then the
from
rest are, like,
disease so much as causes. And now, there are bacteriophages, so bacteria get diseases too, and they're just because they don't have the option to switch to sexual reproduction, they're just doomed.
Okay. Okay, I mean, some sexual species are doomed too because they can't reproduce as quickly to like a changing environment. While like an asexual species can reproduce quickly if like conditions are very favorable. So in our current like ecosystem now, why aren't
One thing to
asexual
also note,
species
though, is
over?
the creatures that tend to be more often going by sexual reproduction are complex organisms, multicellular organisms like creatures like us. And individuals like that don't have mutations that change us as radically or as quickly as it does, say, with bacteria. And our very long gestation times means if somebody has a positive trait, the only way it's going to actually spread out somewhat quickly is if somehow that gene can actually be spread across more than just the most immediate clone ancestor of that person, because again, of our slower reproduction time. So I think that's a factor into why complex organisms tend to do more sexual than asexual reproduction. Admittedly, this is well outside my knowledge base, but I think that's part of the reason why single-celled organisms tend to do plenty of asexual reproduction, complex organisms, primarily sexual reproduction. There's a trade-off basically as you move up the complexity of organisms.
Okay.
At the very least, nothing
Yeah,
that seems to point to anything supernatural. It seems to be more a matter of what helps the numbers in terms of natural selection.
yeah, that's going back. Yeah, that's, so the point was, what would an asexual reproduction majority world look like compared to a sexual reproduction majority world?
Well,
Like
think
an
of it this way.
asexual, I mean, I don't think there would
Well, think of it
be
this way.
as
PK,
many
let's suppose
strong
you
bonds.
could asexually. Let's just say this. PK, let's say you could asexually reproduce. What would your children look like?
Same as me, pretty much. That's why I was going to mention Cell from DBZ. You just have like mini clones.
Okay. So the thing is, though, if you have a trait that isn't that well adapted to the environment, you and all of your clones are done for. You don't have the ability to actually somewhat quickly adjust to changes in environments. Your genome is basically kaput. Because if you and your clones don't have any ability to really change genetically to the environment, you're SOL. Bacteria can at least change asexually more quickly because they have smaller genomes, are generally quote unquote simpler. So they have that advantage that we humans don't quite have.
I mean, don't you? I mean, all you need is a higher mutation rate. You don't have to have like sexual.
And if you'll
What's
notice,
the easiest way to
lots of
accelerate
mutations
that?
come up-
All nature needed to do was create a high mutation rate in that asexual species. I mean, after billions of years, don't you think we should have had like at least one species that does that?
The
That
higher
more
mutation
complex
rate leads
organism?
to instability.
I mean,
If
sure.
you can have a
but you'd still
stable
have-
species, then you need a lower mutation rate.
And all the more so if we're talking a multicellular organism, because a mutation is going to happen random in one cell. How does that coordinate well with the trillions of other cells in your body? If they're all mutating at a high rate, they're not going to coordinate. You're just going to become a giant lump of cancers.
Yep.
Okay, I mean, not that high of a mutation rate, but just enough to create more diversity in that asexual species. I feel like
You
after so many
increase the
millions of years,
mutation
you'd
rate.
have-
You increase the mutation rate, you decrease the stability.
And when you have organisms with literally trillions of cells, the chances of that all nicely coordinating out at that high mutation rate is extremely low, which means that the advantage would be sexual versus asexual reproduction.
Well, okay, not all the cells have to mutate, like just the sexual cells that are used for reproduction.
You still have to have all those cells coordinating with each other, especially in the child popping out.
So wait, are you saying it's impossible to have a multicellular asexual species?
No.
No, because there
I
are
already
some.
described how we have vertebrates, by definition, multicellular, and they're asexual. The New Mexico whiptail lizard is a fine example. They're all females. They're all clones of each other. They don't. The interesting thing is that in order to ovulate, I mean, they're going to give birth to clones. They're giving birth to themselves, but they need the sexual stimulus in order to cause the ovulation, which is a weird thing. So they have to have sexual mating, but there are no males. So they have to mate with other females. So it's
So, okay,
lesbian lizard sex.
How did they survive all these millions of years of evolution against sexual species? Then
I'm sorry,
should
what?
be extinct by now.
What?
Shouldn't these species be extinct by now?
Why?
I mean, how did they even evolve after like 1 billion
Because
years?
they evolved from
After-
sexually reproductive lizards. And a certain lineage of whiptail lizard, one lineage of whiptail lizard, adopted parthenogenesis by mutation. So they're parthenogenic. And now the entire species is just clones of each other.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying we should expect more of this in nature than just like one or two like lizard species.
It's a weird thing that you're saying
There
that
should
we
be
should
more
expect
there
more
are
of
more
something that we
examples.
don't see.
There are more examples, but what number of them do there need to be? I don't get the quandary here.
I think more importantly to me, PK, I don't see the reason why you would actually expect the majority of multicellular, especially vertebrate creatures, to be asexually reproducing. As I've noted, there's some major trade-offs between one thing versus the other. So, like, what model can you actually use to show that we should expect asexual reproduction to be dominant in complex organisms like vertebrates?
Yeah, I mean, you said that there were no
faster?
multicellular organisms that reproduce this way, so I gave you an example of several of a multicellular organism that really does reproduce this way.
So does it reproduce faster than the sexual one? Because it doesn't need to find a mate.
Does it reproduce faster?
Yeah.
I mean, does it evolve faster?
No, does it reproduce?
No, they don't evolve very fast because they're clones of each other. Without sexual reproduction, I mean, sexual reproduction is the way that you put evolution in second gear.
Yeah. So those lizards that don't need to find a mate should be outcompeting the lizards today that do need to find a mate.
Which is also why they're a minority. There are extremely few examples of asexual lizards, so that would seem to be exactly what we'd expect. It's only rare that you find vertebrates that are asexual.
And since they are an asexual species, they're not looking for males of a different species to mate with. So they're not competing with nor mating with
No, they're
another
competing for
lizard.
resources. Like they should be able,
Okay.
like they should be able to just push them out just through reproduction speed.
For whatever reason, in their situation, they haven't been driven to extinction by competition with other lizards.
In nature, we'd say they found their niche.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, I guess.
Okay.
I mean,
I do have to admit,
yeah, I guess
the
that's something
evolution
that
or non-evolution of asexual species, the fact there are any asexual vertebrates is already quite fascinating to me. And how this
Yep.
species actually developed is, to me, an interesting scientific question that I don't know the answer to, and I would love to know more about it. To me, it's an interesting scientific question. I guess ultimately, though, how is this ever going to get us to even contemplating the God question? I'm not seeing the connection between what you were bringing up and apparently a natural theology argument.
yeah. So I was just going to bring that. Like, it would be like a +1 point towards God, I guess, because of what the types of societies that would come up from like an asexual society versus a sexual reproducing society. One creates deeper
I would
bonds, other is
suppose different
more
societies would
shallow.
create different mythologies. Like if bears ruled the world and had civilizations, their gods would look different than the ones that humans have imagined. But don't think that's an
I would
argument
hope.
in favor.
I would hope that bears would not suffer the same situation as we, where we invent gods and religion and then, penalize or and kill anybody who doesn't make believe the same thing we make believe.
No, I was referring more to like the types of bonds that would form like between people or between species, like a mother and a child, and then the bond between the mother and the
I'm
father
not hearing
is
everything you're
deeper than
saying.
just. Yeah, basically, I'm just referring to deeper bonds that are formed between
Deeper
members of a
bonds. Okay.
sexual, like a family unit versus like an asexual reproducing organism. It's not going to have the same, I guess, pleasure drive to, I guess, bond with its own children or with other members of society. It's not going to have the same like romantic feelings or the tight bonds that form between people when they have romantic interest between each other. It's going to be a more strange, like isolated society, which is why I would think it's like one, like the sexual one is like a +1 toward God, the asexual one like a more atheistic world, I guess.
So I guess I don't see the thing here, because why would you expect God to want sexual civilizations? That seems to be a completely arbitrary premise to just deal with the fact that the God of the Bible, for example, is really into this whole sex thing. He cares about it a lot. So
Well,
that
he
must
invented
somehow be
lesbian
natural to
lizards.
gods.
Well,
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
feels like we're back rationalizing ultimately, because if we were completely asexual and all humans were clones of each other, then we would explain why God made the most perfect universe by making us all identical, so that way we are truly all equal, because we're actually all the same. See, it's pretty easy to make these sort of theological arguments after the fact.
well, no, they would be able to look back at like evolution's trajectory in choosing
Right, and
asexual
I'm just
versus
saying whatever
sexual,
that outcome
right?
is, we could come
So
up with
if you
some
had like an
theological argument for why God made it that way. And that's why these
no,
sorts of arguments
if you had,
pretty much go no place
if
fast.
if human society was mostly asexual, and we looked back at evolution and said, why did it choose asexual over sexual? Where we could have had better bonds, stronger pleasure systems between us and our children and our spouses. Why would God
Well,
choose
the fact that we love our mates
older relationships?
as well as our children, and our children are a combination of us and our mates, that's a whole nother bond unto itself.
Sorry, can you repeat that? Can you repeat
Just to
that one more
change
time?
things a bit, PK, if having people bond together to have children so that way they love their children more, wouldn't that argue then that we shouldn't be a bisexual reproduction species, but trisexual or quadrisexual, that 4, 5, 10, 30 people have to come together to have a baby? Because that would show truly powerful bonds if it takes that to produce a child.
I don't think we'd be able to manage 40 people in a relationship. I think the child would be super lost. They wouldn't be able to like have a meaningful relationship with
But wouldn't
40
that produce
people
an even more
in one
powerful
lifetime.
bond if it takes all of that to bring up one child? If the argument is we have pair bonding
I
so
think
that way we have stronger relations, then even bigger relationships would be even stronger. So your argument would actually perpetuate us to always wondering why we don't have more and more people basically hopping into the sex pile to make more humans.
I
I
think
thought it took a village to raise a child. I heard that somewhere.
I mean that's the point of having relatives and cousins and extended family that do help in our current
But you're saying,
society. So
though, that it's actually the sexual pair bonding that makes those things stronger. So I'm saying let's make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you want a science fiction example, there's an Isaac Asimov story called The Gods Themselves, which has as part of the story a trisexual species where there are basically 3 sexes that have to ultimately join together to create their offspring. Ultimately, it's an interesting story, though it also has some problematic things when read through a feminist lens, to put it mildly. But it gives the
I
idea,
mean
at
if you're
least to
gonna
me, it's at least conceivable to have 3 different sexes having to come together to have children. And if 2 pairs bonding is supposed to be powerful, 3 is even more so because it's even more effort to make that bonding work. And then 3 is more than 2, but 4 is also more than 3, 5 is more than 4, and so on. So I'm saying your argument should basically explode on itself, that really the ideal relationship in the mind of the ultimate creator would be everyone has to get together to have sex to have babies. And so literally we should all be in the sex pile right now.
I don't think evolution would like 40 organisms hopping in together to produce one. That would take way too long, and they would probably just run extinct.
So in
Or
other
they even
words,
produce
there's a
10 babies.
natural reason why, and if there's a natural reason, we don't need a god to explain any of it.
There's natural reasons, but I'm just focusing on why it took one path over the other when they're both like equally
But the thing
almost.
is, you are also giving arguments to me to explain why we have pair bonding rather than trinary bonding or quaternary bonding or anything else more complex, ultimately for natural, practical reasons. And if that's the case, then we don't need any sort of theism to even begin to explain what's going on. It's ultimately a numbers game. It's game theory. It's completely explicable in terms of completely secular genetics and mathematics. So again, I don't see where God comes into this.
I'm not entirely comfortable with you all these requests that I be trisexual, because I think there's an implication there. And your suggestion that we should just all jump on the sex pile, I haven't had any gummies, and I think I would need that.
I'm more thinking back to an episode of South Park. The people coming back from the future, and so the people of South Park decided they're going to destroy the future by everyone just having a big sex pile and not actually reproducing. Just everyone hop in the pile.
Okay, yeah, I remember college.
Okay, I guess we can move on from this one. The next
Okay.
one I was going to point out was probably something you've already heard. The uniqueness of solar eclipses for our planet.
The uniqueness of what?
Total solar eclipses for our planet. We
Oh,
have the
The-
sun
the
being
here's the thing.
400 times farther away, and then the moon is like
Well,
400
here's the
times
thing, though.
smaller, but they perfectly align.
The thing is, though, is that they don't,
According to
because sometimes the
Neil,
moon is actually in a elliptical orbit. So sometimes it's closer, and you don't get a total eclipse. You get what we call an annular eclipse. So basically, the sun is able to peek around the entire moon, and you get a ring, an annus for the Latin for why it's called annular. For having a total solar eclipse, all you have to do is just have the moon closer, so its apparent size is greater than that of the sun. So it's not perfect because the apparent size of the moon changes throughout the month, and the apparent size of the sun very, very slightly varies throughout the year.
Maybe I'm not understanding what you're saying, but I thought annular. The only problem with annular is one, it's messy, and two, requires more lube.
Yeah, so what I'm basically saying is, yeah, we do have different like eclipses. We have pretty much all of them, right? Like transit, annular, lunar. But what I'm saying is, our planet has the most, I guess, one of the most unique ones, which is the perfect total eclipse, which is like, I don't know,
But
once
here's
or
the
twice
thing,
a
as I
year.
just pointed out, it's not perfect.
They don't perfectly
Have you
align.
noticed that how we do our calendars, how we do our
I've seen clips
time?
of them.
Have you noticed that nothing lines up exactly the way you'd think it should, right? There's no regular demarcation like of anything. We have the way that the planet rotates. You can say that that's a day. That's, when the sun comes up, the sun goes down. From our perspective, we can count that out as a day. But then, what is a year? What is a month? And how long is a day? Is it 23 point what hours? Right? Why is it not 24? Why can't we get anything to be exactly even numbers, just like you would expect of anything that was artificially created? Why do we have to have leap years? Why do we have to have alternating, or why do we have to alter our calendars to make up for this loss of time or whatever? Why is it 7 days in a week? Not 5 or 10, and why did none of them match up? Why do we have to have an extra day every 4th February? Because nothing matches up the way you would expect it to be if it was created.
Honestly, I have no idea about calendars, so I don't know how to answer that. But okay. So I guess what I would, for this point, I'd expect our planet to have the more messier solar eclipses, like compared to Mars or Venus or Jupiter or Saturn, rather than us having the instances
Well, the thing is, though, it is
of like
messy.
once or
As I've
twice a year.
noted, sometimes we have total, sometimes we don't have total solar eclipses. And it's also worth noting, if we go back in time, the moon was closer to the Earth. So I would have to see what the math is for how far back in time, but go back whatever number of millions of years, every eclipse would be a total solar eclipse, not an annular solar eclipse. We are in a time
Yeah,
where
that's
we get both, and in the future, we'll only get annular and later barely even that.
exactly.
So,
Yeah, that fits.
so the thing
And
That
is,
what
fits
we
our,
would
our
our
today,
point
system
as
isn't
well,
perfect.
what we would today
because it's
count
like
as a
600 million
partial
years
eclipse
ago.
would be a total eclipse, and there would be a lot more of them.
Yeah, so like 600 million years ago, and then 600 million years into the future, there would not be the perfect total eclipses, which just so happens to be visible for intelligent species for us. I mean, how
But
rare
here's
is
the thing,
that?
as I've noted, if you're saying total solar eclipses is a sign of perfection, then going back in time would show that back then it was even more perfect, because you go far enough, you don't get annular solar eclipses at all.
No, back then you wouldn't get any perfect total eclipses. You just have partial, or I don't know.
You keep saying this word perfect, and here's the thing, there's no such thing as perfect. If you want a total solar eclipse, the moon just has to be bigger than the sun, apparently, in the sky. That's all that's needed for a total eclipse.
But yeah, I'm not saying total only. I'm saying it has to be the same exact moon size visible from the Earth to the same exact sun size visible from the Earth.
But
That's
again,
what I'm
I
referring
just
to when I'm
said
saying perfect.
that isn't true. What you just said is false. You don't need them to be perfectly the same size to have a total eclipse. All you have to have is the
I'm
moon
not saying.
bigger
I'm not
than the
saying.
sun.
Yeah, I realize the moon can be a little bit larger, and it can still be a total. That's what I'm saying. I'm referring to our unique moon and sun size. Like, for example, you can see the the outer corona. I don't know what they call it, Bailey's beads or something, uh, around the moon, and uh,
Let's look at it
I
this
guess
way: Jupiter, Jupiter. If Jupiter was a bit bigger, then I'm not sure how much bigger it would have to be, but if it was a bit bigger, then there's the smallest type of star. You could Jupiter could be a brown dwarf, something like that. Jupiter could be a star, and if Jupiter were a star and it's inside of our solar system, that would mean that we are a binary system. And if we lived in one of these very rare binary systems, then your argument today would be the perfection of having two stars, especially when one eclipsed the other. When again, that has nothing to do with whether there's a God or not. Doesn't imply perfection in any way.
A sun eclipsing a sun? Wouldn't that just destroy the planet?
What?
No, if Jupiter were large enough to actually have atomic fusion, it would be a star, and if it were dim enough that it would warm Earth, yes, but it wouldn't necessarily cook us, and we could have the case that because Jupiter would still be going around the sun, we could have an alignment where our sun is covering Jupiter, so we'd literally have a star eclipsing a star, and that would be what we would call pretty cool.
Jupiter's a hell of a lot smaller than the sun and further away from us than the sun. So it would have a negligible effect on our planet.
Yeah, I mean, that would be cool, but we don't have that here.
So God failed.
Yeah, but if we did, that would be an argument for God, right? I mean, whatever makes us different, unique than every other thing we can think of, that means God, right?
I guess if we have more alignment on this planet and all the other planets are just like floppy, then that would be a point for God.
How is the fact that some of the planets are tilted at the wrong angle? How does that work for the perfection argument? How does the ellipses of the orbits? I mean, like Pluto, for example, sometimes darts into and then back out of Neptune's orbit. Sometimes, back when Pluto was considered a planet, it was not always the furthest planet, because sometimes it'd be closer to the sun than Neptune is.
Yeah, so there's no purpose for those planets, really. There's no intelligent species on those, right?
What does intelligent species have to do with anything?
I mean, the whole point of the perfect eclipses is for the species below to appreciate like the alignment up above.
My dear unassuming wife just posted in the chat, Uranus is really windy. I know what you mean to imply there. Uranus is really windy.
Yeah, but here's the thing, PK. If you're going to say the reason we have total solar eclipses, so humans can look at them and be in awe of that, well, here's the thing. That's kind of failed because there's a long history of an eclipse happening and people freaking out and thinking it's the end of the world. So didn't quite
in the Quran,
work out
that's even a description for how to know that the world is about to end. And then, of course, when there was a full eclipse over Arabia, they, of course, just came up with an apologetic excuse for why, when the Quran said that's not what it meant.
Sorry, what's the point about the Quran?
In the Quran, it says that the sun will never overtake the moon, nor the moon overtake the sun.
Oh.
But on the day that happens, that will be a sign of the last day. And that means that if there was ever an eclipse, that would be the last day, the day of judgment. However, there was a solar eclipse over Saudi Arabia, over the city of Medina. I can't remember when it was. But when that happened, of course, there was a bunch of people who had read the Quran for their whole lives and said, this is it. This is the end of times. And then there had to be apologists that say, well, when the Quran said exactly that's not what it meant.
That would be, I mean, they probably knew about eclipses before then. So I think they probably mean like the sun and moon that just collide into each other.
Not in the 700s, not in 650 or whenever it was that the Quran was first composed. No, they didn't. Some people might have.
Know.
Muhammad didn't. Muhammad thought that the earth was flat and that the sun and the moon were both the same size, that they were both bigger than all the stars, and that the stars were just lights set into the solid domicile of the firmament that could be removed from the sky by angels who could just disconnect them from the sky to use them as projectile weapons against genies.
If we want to go also roughly the same time, we have some interesting writings from St. Augustine, because before he was a Christian, he was in this other religious sect called the Manichaeans, and he, Augustus and other Manichaeans believed that a solar eclipse was actually the sun and moon in battle with each other, that this was actually a cosmic fight happening. And only when he learned some basic astronomy to realize, oh, those eclipses, yeah, here in Rome, we can predict them years ahead into the future. And that was actually part of the reason Augustus left Manichaeism and then picked up eventually a different religion, but for somewhat scientific reasons. You have all sorts of other myths from China and from the Mediterranean that when a solar eclipse is happening, it's some sort of giant wolf or giant dragon trying to eat the sun, and people would bring out their pots and pans and start smashing them to try to scare away the beast that's trying to eat the moon. These are the sorts of things that are happening across the world in mythology, suggesting when a solar eclipse was happening, it was supposed to be bad news. It's only in our more scientific minds realizing, hey, we can predict these. That's pretty cool. Hey, we could even use these for scientific observations like they did for the bending of starlight to prove Einstein's general theory of relativity. This is moderns coming in, changing their view of things based on becoming more scientific. If the point of the cosmic dance was to make people in awe and lead us to good things, it took a long time to get there, and by other means than being in awe of things by religious thinking. It was ultimately by cold hard observation, calculation, theorization, testing, all the stuff that religion avoids like the plague because it so often puts religion in a bad light.
Okay. I mean, yeah, but the pattern here is that all of these different cultures took warning to that, I guess, happening. So whichever gods they worshipped or whatever significance they gave to it, it still like forced them to look up and to pause their daily life and to reflect on what could possibly be further out there that's causing this. That's unusual.
Well, the thing is, they thought what was further out there was a giant dome of water. That didn't really help them all that much.
Well, I wouldn't expect them to give them like more scientific understanding then, but more like
Exactly.
spiritual.
So, like I say, that it didn't actually help them spiritually either, because often these sorts of things are like, hey, the sun's getting weak. We better sacrifice some more virgins. This seems to have been partially what happened in like Maya or Aztec culture. To help rejuvenate the sun, you got to start ripping people's hearts out. For spiritual reasons.
My thought is, when you're talking about, well, if there is no God, then why are things exactly the way they are? If there is a God, why doesn't he do something godly? Why don't we all know about him? I mean, like in Gotham City, everybody knows there's a Batman. It's not like an urban legend. I mean, people can verify, there's a Batman. But you can't do that with God. And if you could do that with God, it would be different gods. So, well, I know God exists because I have a personal relationship with him, and his name is Lord Krishna.
Yeah, I think getting to more specific gods would be more difficult, but I think everyone can. Well, how about this question? Why isn't our moon? Why do we have to?
Why is what?
Why do we have to have the most best moon in the solar system? Why don't we have a potato moon?
Aaron, can you hear him? I know you've got headphones on. I'm afraid to turn my volume up all that much.
So, all right. So what he is saying is, why is our moon so perfect? Why is it that it's not potato shaped? Simple fact is, you make things big enough, gravity makes them round. So there's nothing mysterious or supernatural about that. Big things get round.
Yeah.
But isn't there a process by which the moon got larger? I don't know what the exact theory is.
It's by being mass enough in the first place. So the creation of the moon, our best hypothesis for that was an early collision between the Earth and a planet-sized object early in the formation of the solar system. They'll usually call this object Theia. Thera, yes, sorry.
Yeah, Theia.
And
Theia.
it basically was... Yeah, Theia, because it's the feminine form of God. So we literally got hit by a goddess.
It was roughly the size of Mars.
Yeah.
And of course, the Earth wasn't all that big at that time either, because it absorbed this other thing. And the moon is a product of that impact.
Okay.
And if that's difficult to understand, and it might be, there are simulations, computer simulations, that'll show how the impact of Theia against the early Earth could have produced the moon as ejecta from that impact?
So why doesn't Mars, for example, have a moon like ours?
It didn't get smacked up
Why
by the
doesn't
head like we
Venus
did.
have a moon like Earth? Why doesn't Earth have 9 moons like Jupiter?
Because they're all potato.
Why does it matter?
And all the Jovian moons aren't
If there was a
potato-shaped.
God, then why is the Bible wrong about everything having to do with cosmology? Why is the cosmos 78, the observable cosmos 78 billion light years across? Or is it trillion now? I forget. Why is it that we have this infinite amount of wasted space when we can only exist temporarily on a fraction of the skin of this one tiny mote of dust, and everything everywhere will kill us instantly otherwise?
Probably because we're not supposed to be here for too long, Like in the, I guess, Hindu.
Why would you
have,
imagine you're a god and you create 11 jillion galaxies, each of which has hundreds of billions of stars, most of which have multiple planets on them. And you're going to base the entire creation of everything around this one rock. Totally insignificant, off to the side of everything, but you created everything for this rock and for the people who exist only temporarily on this rock.
we still have like 1 trillion years into the future. We might go to other
There's
galaxies
1 trillion
and
galaxies.
take over.
And we're only one of hundreds of billions of planets hundreds of billions of stars in this one galaxy. And there's billions of galaxies. Why the fuck? Clearly, there is no God. Clearly, the Bible's wrong about everything, and so is the Quran. All of it. Got everything wrong.
Or, I guess, either people evacuated, they're not supposed to be here, they went to somewhere else that's better, or this is just the start, and we eventually might.
Aaron, what is he saying?
I am a little bit lost at this point because I don't think we're arguing for theism anymore. I think we're arguing for humans will somehow survive the destruction of what we do to this planet or what happens to the planet.
Yeah, that was a different.
And I am hopeful.
Aaron.
I do hope we survive for a while, but at the very least, I think we've gotten pretty far away from anything with natural theology, and I think we need to take one more call before we call it tonight. So, PK, I think I do need to let you go for the evening.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, that was fun.
All right.
Good luck on your next call.
All right.
Thank you kindly.
You have a good night.
Yeah, I saw in the chat that the other people were having trouble hearing that guy too. I mean, I was straining. I wanted to turn my volume up, but I didn't want to create a feedback situation. So
I was mostly hearing him, but
as I could get it.
Hello, you. This snake loves me.
All right. So I know we are pushing against the time because I heard we have a hard stop at hour. We have super chats, but we do have one more caller that's been waiting extremely patiently, and I think we need to give him the opportunity to at least chat with us for a bit. So let's bring in Maurice, him, an atheist who wants to talk about light on a lake. I am already enjoying the scene, but Maurice, paint me a picture. What you got for us?
Hey, Aaron. I was sitting on Big Creek Lake in Sims, Alabama. This was about 5 years ago. The day was unusually calm. There was not a hint of a breeze blowing. The sun was shining. The lake was as slick as it could be. There wasn't a ripple on the lake anywhere. The sun was up my back. It had been up for about an hour and a half. And I could see my shadow directly in front of me. When I looked to my left, I looked to my right, about 100 yards away, I see a color spectrum of the visible light spectrum line on the water on both sides. And I have searched the internet trying to find more information about it. I've studied a lot about refraction and the properties of water and stuff to try to come up with a hypothesis of what was happening. And I think what I was looking at was a like a footprint of a rainbow, but it wasn't really a rainbow. It was caused by small droplets or little spheres of water
on the surface of the water, of the lake. And I was seeing the refraction and reflection of the sunlight coming back to me. And it was coming back at the right angles for it to be a rainbow on the water. Have you ever, do you know of anything about it being possible for there to be droplets of water on the surface of a lake and it refracting the light and giving you a rainbow pattern on the water?
If you have
So-
a bit of oil or gasoline in the water.
That I think will only be on the surface of the water itself.
It was light. It was light coming back at me. It was bright.
My best guess would be this: is you're saying this is early in the morning, and so I can imagine that.
Yes, it was.
Especially early in the morning, you have a fair bit of fog coming from the water, and fog is ultimately water itself. It's water droplets. That's what a cloud is. And if you have light passing through water, just like if you have like a hose and you put your thumb down, let the water spray, and you'll see a rainbow form that way because of the mist it forms. You can have a mist in the early morning with the dew still in the air, or maybe evaporation off the water itself. I don't know, of course, the exact particulars of it, but my best guess is this is ultimately related to mist or fog just over the surface of the water, and then sunlight pouring through, and then it basically turning into a prism, just like normally how rain can make rainbows, because light passing through water splits it like a whole bunch of tiny little prisms. That'd be my initial guess, what you're describing.
Well, I think I'd be kind of bold to think that I have made an observation that's very, very rare. But I think that's what's happened. I think I'm seeing reflection from little tiny droplets of water on the water itself. But I can't find anything on the internet that talks about it. I've Googled it, and I found nothing.
So, I mean, just for comparison, have you ever taken a hose, put your thumb on it just so the water sprays, and see a rainbow that way?
Oh yeah. I've seen rainbows, making with a garden hose, and I've seen them.
Yeah.
I've seen double rainbows and stuff. So I'm very. I did a lot of studying about rainbows. I've listened to Professor Walter Lewin. He has some YouTube's on TV where he explains rainbows.
Okay, I don't know the name, but nonetheless, I mean, it's well understood as a phenomenon of light refraction, as opposed to reflection. And like I say, that's just my best guess of what you're describing. In the same way, you can see a rainbow in the sky, or you can see a rainbow in front of you with a garden hose spraying. I think it's the same sort of thing. Mist on the surface of the water, refracting light to form a rainbow that you're seeing. And given the fact that you said the sun was behind you because you could see your shadow in front of you, that sounds like mist either on your periphery or right behind you, sunlight passing through that, forming the rainbow that you would then see. That's my best guess of what you're describing. But what can I say? You make me want to come to your lake and see it for myself. It's been a long time since I've been fishing, so you're going to have to show me what to do.
Yeah, I think this is something that's going to be hard to duplicate. Or find the time to go back and see the same thing again. Because I think
weather phenomena are pretty hard to predict ahead.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just want to know if anybody had made any similar observations that I have made with
that. One other thing that's a really weird phenomenon, and I know it completely scared people long time ago, is a thing that are called sundogs. There's apparently not a cloud in the sky, and yet you're seeing these rainbows and other colorful lights in the sky, and it's ultimately due to ice crystals high up in the atmosphere that's causing those rainbows up there. And there's these old medieval books that are showing all these sundogs, and they're basically treating it like it's Armageddon happening in the skies because they didn't understand what was happening. So rainbows have been scaring some people for a while.
But I am convinced that what I was seeing was right on the surface of the water. It wasn't an oil slick or anything like that. And that's the first thing I get from most people that I mention this to.
Yeah, well, like I say,
Well, I
Okay,
think
well,
we've
you
all
don't have to
seen
have it.
we've all
Yeah.
seen
Oh,
that kind
I've
of thing,
seen
though.
oil
When
slick.
there's, yeah, I mean that's
Yeah,
the reason
so
it's the first guess, is because we've all seen that.
yeah,
Yes.
and even so, you could still see the effects of a rainbow at ground level, at water level. It doesn't have to be high up in the sky. So, like I say, I don't see it necessarily a mystery if it's in the morning, the sun is still relatively low on the horizon, and then if there's still mist on the water, it projecting the lights of a rainbow at basically eye level rather than up high. That's at least my best estimate of what's happening. But like I say, what we really would love to do is all come down and check out the lake because
Okay, come visit me.
it's getting cold around here. I'd rather go someplace warm.
All right. Well, I thank you for taking my call, I enjoy both of your books.
Oh,
And,
Oh,
uh,
thank you so much.
And thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, Maurice.
All right, thank
Please
you
have a good
kindly.
night.
So, Aaron, you said we had a hard stop at 8:30.
Yes, particularly our illustrious manager of this whole operation has a hard stop.
Okay.
Yeah, we can go by a little bit to get through the super chats.
Oh, yeah. We seem to have emptied out the call room, so we can definitely go into super chat time.
All right, I'll start off. $5 from Zachary Henry Zachary Herink, two of my favorite hosts. Aaron, I hope my present got to you in one piece. Oh boy, this is embarrassing. What was your present? I received a couple of things recently, but I don't know which one you're talking about. And I can't always identify where did this come from. It doesn't always say. But I'm guessing so,
All right.
because I did get a couple of things.
Okay. So we got $5 from Sheridan Berasconi. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. Bernasconi. I might be closer. My doctor told me I have no magnesium in my blood. I said, OMG. Great show, as always, Aaron and Aaron. I appreciate the pun, but if you're
Yeah.
low on magnesium, you might also be low on potassium, so please go bananas.
Oh, jeez. Okay. All right. Another $5 from Zachary Herrick. Aaron, what is the newest esoteric thing you've learned in your field of study?
I'm going a little bit back and forth in my head what you might mean by esoteric, because when you say that, I'm thinking like supernatural, weird, kooky stuff versus something that's just really minor, but like in the frontiers of physics. I'm going to go the latter because that's more fun. There is some recent new observations of the expansion of the universe that aren't yet, completely confirmed, but are leaning in the direction that dark energy may not be of constant value, that it might actually be something that evolves over time, over the history of the universe. And this would be another revolution in something we only discovered in the late 90s. So it's causing all sorts of stir if this effect is real. And if it is, how do we explain that? So esoteric for now, and we'll find out if it's the real deal maybe in the next several years as observations improve.
Good.
$5 from Aliashana Silverbow. What do you call a wizard who flies around in a UFO? A flying sorcerer. Okay, not bad.
Yeah. I just saw a genie with light brown hair chasing a flying sorceress. Old Bugs Bunny cartoon. €10 from Yordim. I came across underestimation. I don't really understand it. Can you explain it and tell me how the issues that might be tied to it can be solved? You want to explain that
Underdeterminism.
question to me?
So underdeterminism. So basically, you have
Under
some sort of result.
determination.
Yeah. So something is underdetermined if the causes to that thing don't fully explain why you had that outcome, that a different set of causes could have led to the same thing. So why that particular thing? more science, more exploration. That's part of it. And also, especially like in scientific theories, any one set of facts or experiments might underdetermine what's going on, but a constellation of intersecting theories and observations tend to make underdetermination less and less of a problem. But I would say it's very case by case. And right now, my mind is fleeing for me about good things that we can discuss that are underdetermined at this time. Okay.
€5 from Mystic Minds. €5
Sorry,
from Mystic Minds Analysis Tavern. Fun fact, Carboniferous invertebrates got so large because there was a greater quantity of oxygen in the atmosphere. Inverts don't breathe like we do. Yeah, and surprisingly, as I mentioned earlier in the show, there weren't that many large arthropods, really, not like people think. And I'm sorry, I read 2 in a row, so you read the next one.
Very well. So we got $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Seems like the "you need God for morals" crowd really want a route to "I'm better than you." And I think you could just be honest about it. I think there's at least some truth to that, Mr. Monkey at the Typewriter. I'll take this one as well. We got $5 from Corey Springer. I agree. I approve. So that was a psychic message.
$5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Ever feel like theists think logic is just an emotion? Like, turns out the real rationale was the friends we made along the way applied universally?
I see that. I do see. Ooh, we got a good $6.66 from Mal Morius. Aron Ra looks identical to Unfair from the movie Beowulf, and I know I am mispronouncing that Icelandic term.
Yeah, Unfirth.
Unfirth. Okay.
Yes, Unfirth.
I'm not familiar with that character. I'll have to look it up.
And if anything, it should be Danish, not Icelandic if it's Beowulf related. Yeah. This one's you.
Okay, $5 from the Raven 200. Hey, Aron and Aaron, what non-human animal do you think got done the dirtiest by evolution? My pick is the Babirusa. Its tusks screw it in the end. Yes, that's true. That is interesting. And parrots have a similar sort of a thing. If they ever injure their beak, suddenly the beak grows crazy after that, and until it eventually stabs into their throat and they can no longer eat. So that's another one.
My answer would be the panda, the only animal that could be camouflaged in an Oreo cookie factory.
But not so much anywhere else.
Exactly. All right. We got $10 from Mr. Boricua10. Boriquarol. Oracrol. The R is tiny bit. Oh, goodness. I have to admit, when I was growing up, I had speech therapy because I could not pronounce R's correctly. And now you want me to roll this R I can barely pronounce in the first place. Please, be kind. Good sir, number 10. I see Jacob and Steve being dishonest and PK misinformed. Not surprised. Thanks for keeping house. Also, have a good night. And also, sneak!
They're talking about you. Yeah, I love the snake. Well, she loves me. She's very, very friendly. All right, how do you want to close this thing out?
Well, considering the last super chat, the only thing that's now going through my head is Badger. Sorry, I'm stuck in early 2000s internet. All right, okay. So it's worth noting, we got some other shows here on the line that we should be paying us attention to. So you are watching SkepTalk tonight. Tomorrow, there's even more stuff on the line. We got Chewed Gum with Eve Was Framed and Alyssa Ljub. Thursday is the Hang Up. I know Matt is normally the one there, but I don't see anyone scheduled there for the moment. Friday, we got the Transatlantic Call-In Show with Alexander and Josie. Sunday, we got multiple shows. We got the Sunday show with Seth and Matt, and then the Sunday show after dark. Currently scheduled with Paul and mystery guest to be determined, I believe, if I'm reading that right. So, we got good shows coming up, and of course, next Monday, we got more SkepTalk. Who's going to be there? You're going to have to tune in and find out. Aron, any last messages for our wonderful audience?
I have none. The snake I've been wearing for most of the show is an Argentine boa named Nebulosa, and she's very, very sweet. Just to give an introduction to her.
Awesome, awesome. I am snake-free here, and it's going to probably stay that way for a while.
Hasta la bye-bye.
Sayonara.
Bye, Nato.
Amigos. Live long and
Vaya
prosper.
con queso, mi amigo.